20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 10, 11. Oh, I'm counting up now. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I believe we are live with Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green of MissionAero of City Outreach Foundation. She's basically a spy. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. It's pretty awesome. But first of all, I want to thank everyone that tunes in. Appreciate you supporting it a little bit. This is, honestly, I enjoy doing what we're doing here. And if you get nothing out of it, that's okay. But I am live with Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green. I'm going to put her up on camera here so you can actually see who we're talking about. And we're on a split screen right now, Miss Green. And so long story short, I'm going to let you do a little short introduction. I'm not even going to read your bio. I'll let you do that. But tell us just 15 seconds, 30 seconds, who you are, what you're doing.
Sure. Hey, Micah. Good to see you. My name is Jennifer-Ruth Green, and I know Micah from Golden State Baptist College. Graduated from there in 2013, and I'm currently serving at First Baptist Church of Hammond with our benevolent ministries outreach called City Outreach Foundation, and I'm the founder and director of the MissionAero Pipeline. So awesome. That's where I am now.
Fantastic. Well, there you go. That was 15 seconds. That was like perfect, right? Oh, you know what? I have you. There we go. Can you still hear me? I apologize. Well, I mentioned I haven't had a major faux pas yet, but I just gave you a bunch of radio silence there, so that's okay. There we go. All right, we're back on. I just had an echo going on here. Well, so my name is Micah McCurry, and I have the privilege of being the associate pastor at the First Baptist Church of Kenmore in Akron, Ohio. And we're here talking to Miss Green about the ministry she gets to be a part of and her origin story, kind of where she came from. And as she mentioned, we got to meet at Golden State Baptist College under the leadership of Pastor Jack Treber in Santa Clara, California, North Valley Baptist Church. And I will say this, Miss Green, I was telling my wife earlier, one of the things that I first noticed about you was you reminded me of my dad and a lot of his colleagues, because my dad was in the military, and you just the way you carried yourself, you were obviously very just mature, just professional. I wouldn't use the word somber or serious or even serious, because I saw you having fun a lot, but just the way you carried yourself was always very impressive, because it harkened back to walking the halls of my dad's offices in the military, and just the professionalism that the people carry themselves with. And so that always impressed me. And hearing and just watch kind of on Facebook from afar some of your travels and things like that. A small bit of your bio, I don't think you mentioned that you have visited all 7 continents. And so we will talk about that a little bit. But sure. You are now with First Baptist Hammond, working with the MissionAero Pipeline, City Outreach Foundation. And before we get into that stuff, the ministry and where you're at, if we could go back, if this was a comic book and we were going to go back to Jennifer-Ruth Green, origin story, comic book number 1, where would we find you? Where would you be at that time? Who are your parents? Where'd you come from? If you want to go even farther back, grandparents and all that, great. But where'd you come from?
So my mom and dad, my dad's from Jersey, and my mom was born and raised in the Philippines, Paul and Vivian Green. And so my dad was in the Air Force, and while in his travels on the way to Vietnam, he was stationed in the Philippines and met my mom. And then he went and served in Vietnam. My mom came from the Philippines to the United States. And then shortly thereafter, after my dad's return, they got married. And so that was in 1969. And then they had 6 kids. And so I'm the baby of 6. I have an older brother. My oldest brother is Paul. And I have a brother named Thor, Hector, Jeremy, my sister Jubilee, and then there's me. So I was born in Long Beach, and when I was 4 years old, the Air Force moved my dad to Sacramento, and that's where I spent the majority of my formative years before heading off into college and the ministry.
Awesome. So how did, obviously, so you had dad in the military, so that kind of probably left an imprint on you. at what age did you say military's for me? You had mentioned you got saved at a Christian camp. Where was that? How old are you? You might have said, I apologize if you said, but how old were you then? And at what point did you decide this is God's will for me? Or maybe it was before you were thinking God's will. How did that come about?
Sure. So when I was 9 years old, I went to a Christian camp called Wolf Mountain Christian Camp in Grass Valley. And it was there that my camp counselor, her name was Andy Ormond, she led me to the Lord. And so I trusted Christ then. And then when I was at a church called Faith Baptist Tabernacle in North Highlands, California, Pastor Mike Rogers, while serving under his leadership, we had a really outstanding youth group. And so Mark Maxwell, Ali Maxwell, they led our youth group. And while there, just got rooted and grounded in the word of the Lord. And when I graduated high school, it was a little bit of a conflict. I knew that I wanted to go into the military, but the thought for Bible college was there, just the maturing and obviously the growth you would get. So in high school, though, there was the junior ROTC program. We had an Air Force program at our high school, and my sister participated in it. And like you mentioned, my dad was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force. And so I wanted to do something with the military, and I knew I wanted to use languages and travel. So when we were younger, my mom and my dad, they wanted us to study languages. So my dad studied Russian. My mom speaks Tagalog because she's from the Philippines. But they didn't find a Russian school in the Sacramento area. So they sent us actually to Japanese school. So every Saturday from 2nd grade to 10th grade for 3 hours, we would study Japanese language, culture, reading, writing. And then in high school, I studied French. And so I said, hey, I know I want to do something with languages. And so then when I was a freshman in high school, in our junior ROTC program, we had two influential instructors, Colonel Fraser Fortner and Chief Philip Cameron. And so Colonel Fortner and Chief Cameron, they kind of talked to us about the different avenues of commissioning. And one of them was the Air Force Academy. So I thought, you know what? That's something that I think I would be interested in. So I decided in high school that was going to be something I wanted to do. And eventually, long story short, I ended up getting accepted. I went to the prep school first for a year and then graduated from the Air Force Academy in 2005. But while there, I knew I wanted to do something with languages, so I minored in Japanese. And the goal in 2005, when I graduated and commissioned as a lieutenant, Condoleezza Rice had just become the first Black female Secretary of State. And I said, hey, that's what I want to do. So that was goal setting right there. But I realized after a couple years in the Air Force that God kind of was redirecting my path. And the Secretary of State is basically the chief ambassador, if you will. And an ambassador is a liaison between two sovereigns. And so basically I just share that God called me to be an ambassador for the King of Kings when he directed my path to ministry. And so, it's been an amazing time, and it's how I got saved and kind of where I came from. But with our youth group, we just got rooted and grounded, and a lot of my, just the young people in our youth group, we come from a church of about 120, 150, and we have missionaries, we have evangelists, we have Christian school teachers, we have pastors' wives, we have pastors, just the gamut. And that age group just kind of grew in the Lord under, the Maxwell's leadership. And so it was just been a blessing, and something that I often refer back to when I process kind of the work that I'm doing, just the rooting and grounding from my time at Faith Baptist.
That's awesome. One of the keys, you kind of just brought it up, but the childhood, and I get probably more teenage years, I would say, I would guess, but being, as you said, rooted and grounded in truth, and that carrying through, train up a child in the way you should go. That's so awesome. Now, so that brings you kind of to where you are now, and it's awesome to see you being sensitive to the Lord's leading, going in the military as you feel that that's God's will, and then deciding to get out and all. Well, being so in the Air National Guard, correct? So, what kind of most people might know, but what kind of responsibilities does that require from you on the day-to-day or week, month-to-month basis for you?
Sure. So with the Guard, we're just like the reserves, but we belong to the governor. It's kind of the state's militia.
Hmm.
And we work 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, and that's our minimal commitment. But there are always opportunities to kind of pitch in and serve and wear the uniform and kind of just do some duties, extra duties, additional duties, things like that. So it's a really amazing opportunity. And as a Christian, I know sometimes people often ask, is it doable as a Christian in the military and things like that? And 100% yes. And I glean a lot of the training as far as leadership goes and as far as just organization and things like that from the military, and I can bring it back to the ministry. And so just multifaceted help across so many areas. But yeah, it's a big blessing.
Awesome. Yeah, and all the bureaucracies under the government, all the parts, military probably functions the best out of all of them. So as you some of the organizational things you can learn, and obviously my dad, just fantastic. He's a special character as far as organization goes and all that stuff.
Your dad is a colonel, right?
Yeah, he retired as a full bird colonel. Yeah.
Very nice.
So,
Wow.
yeah, and so so that's kind of what you have going on the military side, and that's to some degree how you got here. And I'm sure we could delve into that a little bit. I'm incredibly impressed with the amount of discipline it takes to take that much of your Saturday to go learn Japanese and all that stuff. Now, so how much Japanese do you speak now?
Well, I'm actually going to Japan in a couple months for a couple weeks. And so I feel like I can be conversational and be okay. A lot has been forgotten. Sorry, Sensei. But I feel like I could do okay.
Awesome. Now, any other languages? Did you get into Russian at all, or Arabic with the military? Anything like that?
Well, I studied French in high school for 4 years, and then haven't picked it up since. But just reading it is it just comes back really easily. And when I was in Long Beach, First Baptist Church in Long Beach with Pastor Wilkerson, I grew to love the Spanish people and the Spanish language. And so I just kind of picked that up by ear. And I've been to several Spanish-speaking countries for missions trips and just vacations. And so I've grown to love it and kind of picked that up as well. So
Awesome. Now, if you're just joining us, we have Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green with us. She is with the MissionAero Pipeline there in Hammond, Indiana. She helps with the City Outreach Foundation, the benevolent arm to some degree of First Baptist Church of Hammond under Pastor John Wilkerson. She is a Air Force veteran, still in the Air National Guard, and so it's a privilege to have her with us. Now, you got your pilot's license in 2005. Did I recall that correctly? So how much training how much preparation went into that? Were you in planes long before that with your dad, or how did that come to be?
Sure. So I honestly had no inclination to fly at all. I know Air Force Academy, they make pilots. That's what they do. But like I shared a little bit ago, I wanted to be an ambassador, and then I wanted to be the Secretary of State. That was my plan. And so I knew I wanted to do something with languages and travel the world. So I figured I would go the diplomatic route. I figured I would be a foreign area officer or something like that. And so when I was a junior at the Air Force Academy, 2 degree we call it, we had a ceremony where we were celebrating the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. And they were the first Black military pilots. And so Lieutenant Colonel Lee Archer, he was in the 99th, flying fighter squadron. He had asked me a question. He was at the event, and we were all, as juniors, getting ready to select or request our job opportunities. And so he came up to me and greeted me, and it was very kind. And he just said, "Hey, Cadet Green," he said, what are you thinking about doing after graduation? And I said, "I think I'm going to do intelligence, sir." And then he asked me, "Hey, are you pilot qualified?" And I said, "Yes, sir," because we all have to get eval'd regardless of what we decide to do. And then he looks at me and he says, "If you don't stand on our shoulders, who will?" And it was probably one of the most convicting statements to date, at that time for me. And so I just thought, wow, these people have sacrificed so much. They really went through a lot to be able to earn the opportunity. Because it was only 1865 when slavery ended, and now here we are in 1940s when they're fighting the war, and now here they are finally getting the opportunity to fight. And so it wasn't that long ago that, people were in bonds and chains. And so now they're functioning at a high level. They have the opportunity to serve as officers and be bomber escorts. And so I thought, man, they fought hard so that I could have the opportunity. And if someone's going to pay to train me, why not? So it was then that I decided to fly. And that my senior year, I found out that I got in a pilot slot for the Air Force. And so we began training. And it was actually a course I took. So from January to March of 2005, I went to the airfield every day and flew a small aircraft and did my written exams and did my practical exams and got my license, and it was just one step down the road. So it was an exciting time for me.
That's very cool. That's almost super convicting too on the spiritual side, with the amount of people that, you go back 2,000 years obviously and beyond that, but the amount of blood that was shed to get us where we are. And
Sure.
then I thought, if you won't stand on our shoulders spiritually, looking at the older men of God and all that stuff, that's awesome. That's a great thought. If you won't stand on our shoulders, who will? Fantastic. Now, have you been able to interact more? I know we're getting to a point where there can't be many of them left due to just age and all of that. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the last World War I veteran died, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Had 112 years old or something. But have you had a chance to interact with the Tuskegee Airmen or anybody of that caliber since then?
Sure. So throughout college, we had those ceremonies where we got the chance to interact with them. My dad was actually a chapter president in Sacramento of the Tuskegee Airmen for a few years, and so there were several in the Sacramento area. And then one of my classmates, he's Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin. Obviously, no endorsement for any of this by the U.S. Air Force or the DoD, but Colonel Ruffin, he started a nonprofit called Legacy Flight Academy. And the purpose is to know and grow and live the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. So he introduces young black youth. I guess it's kind of repetitive, but black youth to aviation. And so by providing airplane rides, by presenting the opportunity to meet a Tuskegee Airman if there's one in the local area. And so the goal is to continue to press on. And so MissionAero Pipeline, Legacy Flight Academy, we're actually combining together to kind of run a youth event in April where we'll fly 150 young people and then share with them about the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen.
That's cool.
It is. It's amazing. And another thought, just to process for us, Colonel Archer is the one who inspired me to fly and encouraged me to fly. And the Bible also says in Psalm 139 verses 3 and 4, it talks about how children are as an arrow in the archer's quiver, basically, loose paraphrase. Mm-hmm. And so the purpose or goal of an archer is to prepare the arrow to make an impact where it lands. And so when calculations, or perhaps it's just getting into a target for target practice, or maybe it's going into an enemy, but regardless, the archer has to assess how that arrow flies, how to pitch it, what angle to pitch it at, all those things to make sure that it can make an impact where it lands. And so our goal with, as part of the MissionAero Pipeline, we're kind of we're in City Baptist schools. And because of that, we're kind of in just a straight pipeline to missionary aviation. But we want to be able to take the opportunity to help other young people and introduce the concept of aviation, aerospace, science, technology, engineering, math. And so we've developed just recently our outreach ministries, and we're calling that the Archer Ministry. And so the purpose is kind of an homage to Colonel Archer, but also we want to propel our young people to make an impact where they land spiritually, and so where they land in life, where they land for the Lord. And so we're we're developing the Archer Academy series, and that includes Archer Camp. It includes other outreach events, but we're not letting the legacy die. So it's like a great partner.
Just so for people to wrap their heads around, no pun intended, give us the bird's eye view of what the City Outreach Foundation, maybe just touch on. I think you said 5 different ministries. Maybe touch on what each of them do. If you can kind of zone in on the MissionAero Pipeline and nuts and bolts, what it means in the classroom, out, extracurricular activities, things like that. A bird's eye view, and then zoom in if you would.
Sure thing. So the City Outreach Foundation, like you already mentioned, is the benevolent arm of First Baptist Church of Hammond. So it's a nonprofit 501c3, and I have the privilege to serve as the community liaison, and that involves just kind of making sure that people are aware of what we do, helping the community to understand, and also give them opportunities to interact with us. And so the 5 ministries include City Baptist Schools, which is a K through 12 school that was started for our bus ministry young people. Brother Hiles felt like, hey, we train them, we pick them up on Sunday mornings from the Chicago area, bring them to Hammond. And for reference, Chicago is you can be on the south side of Chicago from Hammond if you go northwest for about 20 minutes. And then you can be across the city in about 45 minutes to an hour to the north side of the town. And so the bus ministry would take all these young people in, and they didn't have the opportunity during the week to get solid Christian education. And so that's why City Baptist Schools was started, and primarily a ministry there. Then we have the Better Roads Recovery Ministry for men and the Better Roads Recovery Ministry for ladies. And those are our addiction recovery homes, 6-month in residence, $1,000 pays their entire tuition for those 6 months, all their room and board and food, things like that. But we just have the opportunity to help people just restore relationships, restore broken lives, understand the grace of God, and just see it applied. So we really get to see lives changed, and we have people that work incredibly hard in those ministries to help those people. And then the 4th ministry is the Hammond City Rescue Mission. So we run the only men's homeless shelter in in Hammond. And so we've had a polar vortex recently in the Midwest, as you're aware. But it's been a great ministry to be able to bring people in from outside, out of the cold, provide them with food and shelter, and obviously God's word. And so those are 4 ministries, and the 5th, recently added last year, was the MissionAero Pipeline. And so that was kind of a burden on my heart that the Lord just started in me. Back in 2015, I went to visit Seth Lunday and his family in Brazil. And so I was there. Pastor Wilkerson was speaking at a conference. His wife was there. Pastor's mom was there. And we got to see some of our great friends down there. And it was just an opportunity for the missionaries down in Brazil to kind of have a time away. It was their annual conference for all the missionaries in Brazil, but also a time of revival for the church. So we kind of were there for about 10 days or so. And so while we were there, some of my friends kind of mentioned, they said, hey, oh, you're a pilot. And I hadn't actually flown in 10 years because I took a hiatus, transitioned out of flying. It was a good decision for the Air Force at the time. It just was kind of a difficult path for me. And so I ended up washing out and transitioning to another job. We call it AFSC. And so anyways, 10-year hiatus, and I hadn't really touched planes a lot in the meantime, probably about 10, 15 hours or so. And so I wasn't really confident, but that was just something that they had known about me. So they said, hey, we are trying to do a new work, and we're trying to reach the people in the Amazon. And so we have 1 plane and 1 pilot that kind of help us as missionaries, and they help all the missionaries in the region. So if that plane is down, it's a float plane. If that plane is down or that pilot's down, then we really don't have an opportunity to do anything. So they said, you should get your license, or you should come over here and take your license and use it. And so it's almost like a Macedonian call, but an Amazonian call. Yeah, come over here and help us. So I was just kind of on the way back. I was talking to Pastor Wilkerson, and I said, hey, sir, I haven't flown in a while. And I said, I feel like the topic of being a pilot just kind of opens doors in conversations and talking about the military and just as a door perhaps for soul, things like that. But really, I just don't have a practical use. And pastor said, I think you should continue to pursue it because it may be something that the Lord would use. And now such prophetic words, right? So that was in 2015. And so to kind of shorten up a little bit, in 2017, started working towards figuring out a way to kind of develop and serve missionaries through aviation. So that's the vision of the MissionAero Pipeline, to develop and serve missionaries through aviation. But our mission statement is to professionalize youth for post-secondary opportunities, using aviation with an emphasis in missionary aviation. So that's what we desire to do, and our long-term big picture is to develop and serve missionaries. But we get to develop missions-minded leaders that have a skill set. Perhaps it could be a tent-making ministry. Perhaps it's something that people could use to help a local church out, or perhaps it could inspire them to just give or go to missions. And there's so many avenues, but it's a life-changing opportunity. And so our goal ultimately is to be able to take a young person through this training, starting from 5th grade through the pipeline, all the way through to earning their pilot's licenses in conjunction with their degrees and being debt-free and ready to go to the field. But missionary aviation, or aviation period, is an expensive undertaking. But we desire to have sponsors, and God has blessed incredibly, and people have donated their time, and we work with great groups to help meet that goal. There's so much more to the MissionAero Pipeline, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts, or the shell, if you will.
Awesome. And I try to keep, well, I've only done 2 or 3 of these so far. I try to keep my editorial comments to a minimum because this is about you. But just a thought that I've been told before, I guess it just came to mind, so I'll share it. But the thought that, number one, God can use your talents for His glory, obviously. But when you have desires and you have things that you'd like to do, whatever they may be, aviation, sports, you name it, the sky is the limit. And again, that pun was completely unintended. I apologize for that one. That was bad. But there's so many avenues for ways that God can use what you do well and what you're passionate about. And for instance, my father-in-law, he loves football. I love football, and we get to work with the Midwest Christian Boys Football Camp that we kind of talked about a couple months or so ago. But hundreds of young men saved, called to preach through a ministry that it's called Football Camp, and obviously it's not all about that. But you get to literally train people using your expertise, something you're passionate about, something you love, something that's in your blood almost, and with your dad, and in who you are with the Tuskegee Airmen, and all of that. It's just so awesome to see God using that. And people think serving God's boring. Well, landing a float plane in the Amazon doesn't sound very boring. And I don't know if it's crocodiles or alligators, which one they have down there. But regardless, it's not boring. And you're obviously a testament to that. But that's so awesome. Now, what are and maybe some of the things you'd rather leave unsaid instead of putting them out out there, but what are some visions or dreams for what the MissionAero Pipeline? And you mentioned that's not everything, that doesn't encapsulate everything that it is already. So maybe expand a little bit on what it is, but what are the goals and dreams for what it even could be with the foundation that you've been able to build in just a year?
Sure. Wow, we are incredibly blessed. And I think I was just talking today about it with one of my best friends, Adria Ludwig. We were just kind of chatting about how God has blessed this program and just reflecting on what He's done in a year. And so what we do is we recognize that there are less than 8% of people that desire innately to go into STEM fields. And so that statistic is on our website. And so we know that it's such a small percentage, but in reality, I think a lot of it has to do with exposure and making those different elements enjoyable. And so the aerospace industry sounds technical, but it's amazing. Like you said, we can do so much through it. There are engineers that work for a chocolate company called Blommer's Chocolate Company, and they engineer the food, specifically how it works together, and then people taste it, and they're required to just kind of make the mixtures that make the most pleasing type of chocolate in a different country, in a different region, and different areas have different taste buds. And you'll notice Coca-Cola tastes different in different countries for specific reasons. But these food engineers, it's a very interesting thing that few people know about. And so we can have the opportunity to expose young people to these kinds of different things just to make it fun. But so what we do is we start in 5th grade, and we take our young people, and they have a 25-hour course in science, technology, engineering, and math. So they have that STEM opportunity. And then we'll throw aerospace in there with kind of a question and answer period, or perhaps we'll do some pilot exercises with them just to kind of teach them, maybe it's geography lesson, something interactive during their 5th grade year. But we have a partner called Starbase, and they will take them for a week, go through different experiments. And one of the things that I like to talk about is that they'll take an experiment called Egbert, and they have kind of a little zip line that they have going down their classroom, and they'll give our young people, they'll give you an egg, and non-hard boiled egg, and you have the opportunity to spend, let's say, $1,000 in their store. And you might be able to buy cardboard, and that may be $500. You might be able to buy a little bit of cotton, and that may be, another couple hundred or whatever it is. But you have to buy a string to be able to put it on the zip line. And so they build this crate for Egbert, and then float him down the zip line, and hopefully he doesn't crack. But they learn different skills. They learn about program management. They learn that they have to budget their funds. They learn that that building something to make sure that something doesn't break, you can use that illustration for building a race car or for building a cockpit. And so they learn those types of things in a way that is fun for them and kind of whets their appetite. So then from 5th grade through graduating 8th grade, they have the opportunity to go to summer camps with Starbase. And when they hit 14 years old, they can start going to flight camp. And so that's a camp specifically for young men to introduce them to missionary aviation and, the mechanics, airframe and power plant side. And so they can do that with our other partner, Wings as Eagles. But at 14, when they get into 9th grade, 9th through 12th, that's where they're in a specific curriculum with me, and we have another teacher, Miss Rachel Updike, and we have members of our staff, Mrs. Megan Schmidt, Miss Princessa Baltazar, and so we have aviation, character, career, and missions. And we developed the curriculum for 4 years that would take a freshman all the way through those different elements. Things that they would need. So aviation, the goal is to help them understand and be able to pass their private pilot's license exam. Character, it's how to obtain and maintain suitable employment. So we talk about what is suitable employment, how do you get a job, how do you keep a job. So we talk about responsibility, showing up on time, communicating with your boss, what the different types of clothing are. So if you're going to a formal event as opposed to business casual, or how to act in an interview. And then we have character, and that's how to make and keep friends. And so we talk just about modeling and mentoring in your behavior. And so we reference things like standing up when you're shaking someone's hand, or making sure that if you're sitting and a woman needs a seat, then you would offer that seat. Etiquette is something we'll go over, which fork to use when. And so just how to conduct yourself as a person, that's the character portion. And then missions. We talk obviously about how aviation falls into missions and how it can be used to supplement the work of the Lord. And we believe exactly that. All of us are called to share the gospel. And foundationally, we want to always make sure that we maintain the fact that our goal as missionary aviators is to be a missionary first. So we share the gospel in the same way that somebody who is a musician goes to the field. If they're not soul winning, it doesn't matter how much they play the piano or how well they sing. they're not doing the work that they're supposed to do. And so aviation is an augment to the ministry, but first and foremost, we need to be soul winners. So we talk about God's worldwide call to missions. We just did a lecture on globalization and the fact that the world is so small because of technology, because of perhaps for America, our military presence on different bases. And so America has a broad influence, but it's not always something that people are going to have a positive response to. And so we have to understand that. So knowing our history, knowing our decision making as a country, how does that play into where we want to go? And we talked a little bit about how sometimes people think, just as missionaries, you could just walk into a country and say, hey, we're going to give you food, we're going to give you clothes, we're going to give you this. And that may work in certain avenues. However, if you're called to more modernized countries, those things aren't always going to work. So what does that mean for you? How can you have a regular discussion about things? So we want to create a well-rounded person and help them to understand, sure, read up on history, but read up on their history, read up on sports read up on rugby, read up on soccer if God's called you to Europe and things like that. So we just want to make sure that we develop a passion for missions, God's call, obviously, to missions. We explain that, explore that. And throughout the curriculum at the high school level, we have several guest speakers and several events. So guest speakers will Skype them in, we'll bring them into the classroom, and they'll talk about their areas of expertise. We're excited soon. Our FBMI director, Dr. Mark Bushy, well-respected man, very much appreciate him. He'll come and talk to their students. When missionaries come for missions conference, we'll bring them in, and then different events that they have. So we already talked about the Archer Academy series. All of our missionaries can go to the Archer Academy series events, but we'll also have, for example, we have this event where we're calling it Full Steam Ahead, and we'll invite aerospace companies, STEM companies. They'll come. We have military support. They're bringing aircraft, the mighty A-10, and perhaps some helicopter support from our Army counterparts. And they'll have the opportunity. We have phase 1, which was 5th through entering 9th, phase 2, which is 9th through 12th. And then the final phase is phase 3. And that's where they're attending college. And in the summer, that's where they do their flight training. So our partner, Wings as Eagles, it's a missionary aviation service in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And so if someone feels led to the mission field and they attend a Bible college, then the opportunity for them in the summer is to work as an intern and serve at the church there, Wildwood Baptist Church, and earn their flight time, and then also take missions trips with missionary aviation opportunities, and then get the training that they need in order to progress, and then go back, during the school year to college. So that's kind of the pipeline. And I know you asked big picture goals. What do I picture this program looks like perhaps 5-10 years from now? I would say that my prayer is foundationally, we are still the same, unadulterated by pursuits of perhaps going towards more humanitarian efforts. Not that those are wrong in and of themselves. They're very good. But the call to be a pastor or help a church or help a pastor is, I believe, the call of the Christian. And so church planting primarily for the use of aviation. And then also, we're excited if any of our young people go out into any industry, but they're missions-minded young people. I would just love people to be missions-minded around the world and increase the work of missions, because I believe the time is short. So I don't have statistics, I don't have numbers, but I just want to maintain an unadulterated, God-pleasing program where the numbers will come if they come, but regardless, we are keeping the main thing, and that is making sure that we fulfill the Great Commission uprightly and honorably.
Awesome. There's obviously a lot to unpack there. I love the fact that, number one, you're obviously passionate about it, and the fact that you have a knowledge about it and an excitement about it. Because what's the point of doing something you're not excited about? And that kind of echoes back to what I was talking about. what you're excited about and what you love to talk about. I'm speaking to everyone that's listening. God can use that thing. And so that's awesome. Now, to kind of segue, and because you kind of brought it up in our discussions as we were talking about this, not a question that this isn't a question that I would probably normally ask, but you mentioned the joy or the fact that you can enjoy being single and serving in ministry. And for folks out there, and I know some folks, both male and female, that, went to Bible college, expected to get married coming right out of Bible college, didn't happen for them. And they're kind of like, what do I do now? And obviously you're enjoying what you're doing. You're loving what you're doing. You're serving God. You believe you're in the center of God's will. But what are some thoughts you would give to, if you were talking to a roommate in Bible college back in the day about the fact that they don't have a boyfriend yet, they don't have a girlfriend yet? How would you address that with somebody, seeing that you are not only professionally successful, but spiritually successful? You're at a point in your life where you are happy with where God has you. How would you address that?
You're so kind. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the question. I feel like oftentimes we hear, singleness is a gift, and sometimes catchphrases that can kind of be discouraging because it doesn't seem like a gift all the time. But honestly, the way that I look at our opportunities in life, Pastor Wilkerson often says that in the Garden of Eden, God gave Adam a job, and then he gave him a family. He gave him a responsibility, and then he gave him a helpmeet. And so I believe that I have the opportunity to do what God has called me to do. And at the moment where I can be a helpmeet to someone, and I can help him do exactly what he's called to do, then God will make that happen. And so if I am more available to God now to forge this program, or if I'm more focused on what God would have me do now, and he knows me and it would be a distraction, or he knows me and perhaps the person that I'm intended to be a helpmeet for isn't ready to do what he's called to do yet, I feel like those kinds of things are thoughts that comfort me, because I know so many of my peers, and they're in marriages where perhaps they just feel like I'm not a helpmeet, or I'm all alone, and they have a ring, but yet they don't necessarily communicate, or they want to go in two separate directions, or they're not really helping one another. But at the same time, I do know many godly marriages that are really blossoming for the work of the Lord and making one another better for God's work. And so I just don't want to run into a situation where I try to do something prematurely, because that is a lifelong commitment, and something that, if it's not right, could make so many things difficult. And I honestly fear being out of God's will in that element more so than striving to try to do something on my own. So that's how I kind of operate in my thoughts on it.
I've said that's awesome like 6 times already. And I apologize. That is awesome. I mean, there's so many things that just that last thought. I mean, that could almost go on a T-shirt. Fear being, in all seriousness, fear being out of God's will more than you fear fill in the blank, being single, you name it, whatever the case may be. And people that you mentioned, they probably feared being alone so much that they went with the wrong one, and now they're in a lifetime of or they get divorced or something. And I like how you said a lifelong commitment, and you establish that going in. Great decisions are made before great decisions have to be made, and you decide that's going to be lifelong from the get-go. But you're exactly right. I love that. Fear being out of God's will. There's nothing worse than that, because the greatest peace, the greatest joy, happiness, the greatest company can be found in the center of God's will. And so I love that. I also appreciate you being, I wouldn't even say confident enough, because that really doesn't even factor in, but self-assured, but open enough to share that, because there's a lot of people that they carry that as a skeleton in their closet, as if I'm not good enough for whatever reason, but you found exactly where God has for you, and you're looking it's not a cloud. It's not looking for silver lining, because it's not a cloud. It's just where God has you at this time. And so I love the outlook on that. Now you have the opportunity, obviously, to impact a lot of young men, a lot of young women. What is the breakdown in City Baptist for the kids? Does every fifth grader go into the program from the get go, or do they have a choice, or how does that work?
So every fifth grader gets the opportunity to go to Starbase. So we kind of view it as a funnel. So everybody starts here, whet your appetite. Does it work for you? Do you like it? And then as we funnel down and you get into high school, then our missionaries are selected for their character. We had a conversation with the administration at City Baptist Schools, and as we were talking, we just said, hey, I can work with somebody who is interested and willing to put in the work. But I can't work with somebody who is smart and doesn't care to do anything. And so these people put in their applications or their interest cards, and they were selected for their character. We only selected 20, kept the class size small for the purpose of keeping a small instructor-student ratio, or a low instructor-student ratio. And I've heard the statistic. Dr. Bob Green is a mentor of mine. Call him Uncle Bob because we have the same last name, but he's 6'4", tall white man. Love him to death, but I say, hey, Uncle Bob, and people know his last name and they give us weird looks, but they try to figure out which one of us is adopted. So Uncle Bob, he tells me that less than 1% of all pilots become missionary aviators. And so recognizing that fact, if we bring through a class of 20, and perhaps in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, we have one person, the program does not necessarily fall apart because there are so many elements that are designed to develop you as a well-rounded, missions-minded leader, that if you want to go to missionary aviation, we are going to do our best to help you, train you, and prepare you. But otherwise, we're still training you, preparing you, and helping you. Just we can't help you as much towards that specific area. So we know that the opportunities are not the opportunities, but the expectations as far as that number is small. But that's generally who we're working with: young people who are motivated to serve the Lord and desire to grow and are willing to put in the work.
Awesome. So you have a lot going on a daily basis, obviously. Now, what ministries I feel like I'd seen on Facebook? Do you get to teach a Sunday school class, or what ministries do you get to be involved in on Sunday? You're in the ministry on the day-to-day basis, sure. But what ministries do you get to be involved with on Sundays?
Sure. Sunday mornings, my roommate is Adri Ludwig. I mentioned her before, but she and I teach the Life Changers Adult Ladies Sunday School class. So we have about 10 to 12 ladies that we get the chance to minister to on a weekly basis, preparing lessons. My roommate, Adri Ludwig, I'll just call her Ludwig because it's easier. People often ask why, but so maybe this is just the opportunity for the World Wide Web to understand why. So in the military, they call you by your last name. And so when you earn the right to be called by your first name, then and only then are you able to be called that. So Ludwig is still here. Nah, she's being called by her last name, but I kid. She's a good friend to me. But that's the origin of that. So she and I get the opportunity to teach. She's a musician, and so very talented songwriter, pianist, and music teacher, tour trainer, all the above. She does it all, plays for First Baptist Church of Hammond, one of three. And so we get the chance to minister to our ladies and just pray with them, teach them, and I develop Sunday school lessons. And when I'm at military drill, Ludwig will take the realm and she'll do the teaching, but largely she takes care of our activities and all of the things that make Sunday school run. And I just get up there and share what the Lord's put on my heart.
Very cool. Now, you mentioned that you have been to, in your bio, that you've been to 7 continents. And for those of you that are watching, that are listening, you can find her bio. I put it in the Facebook description as well as the YouTube channel description, so you can read that. I mentioned to her that it sounds like a bunch of spy stuff is what it sounds like to me. So, but anyway, you've been to 7 continents. So I've been to, let's see, 2, technically 3, I guess. I've been to Israel, and so I guess I get that. I've been to Europe. My dad was in Germany for 4 years. I've been to obviously America, North America, but not farther afield than that. So you've got me beat 7-3. So give us a quick breakdown of how you got to all 7, especially the really cold one.
Sure. So I claim Antarctica because we had this polar vortex and it was minus 44 this week. So that, no. Obviously North America. In 1999, I was in high school and I took my first trip overseas to Japan, and that was part of our Japanese language training. Parents sent me over there for a couple weeks with the class, and it was beautiful. And then after I graduated from the academy in 2005, I backpacked through Europe, backpacked through Asia for a month at a time in each, staying in hostels, that kind of thing. It was wonderful. And then after Bible college, I visited Ruth. I love Ruth. And Ruth and her family are missionaries in South Africa. So Ruth Myers. And so I visited them in 2015 to go to South Africa. I also spent some time in the desert. So I know that counts as, I don't know, Asia, Africa. I'm really kind of confused, but Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, those 3 countries. And so before I came on staff at FBC Hammond, between graduating Golden State and coming on staff, I was a flight attendant. And so I had the opportunity to travel, and I went to Australia. So I think we're at 6 now. And then I always joke, I said, you know, in your lifetime, my parents will pay for, like in the Green household, my parents will pay for a lavish wedding or a trip of your choice. So I'm off to Antarctica. So my parents sent me to Antarctica 2017, and I was there on an expedition ship. And so it was an amazing time, and I think that's how I ended up across all the continents. But I love travel. I love the world. I love cultures, you know, wanted to be an ambassador and whatnot. But yeah, it's been amazing. I love it.
Very nice. So the next time I hear someone insinuate that serving God is boring, again, I'm just going to right in the nose. Absolutely not. That's very cool. Very cool. Now, I feel like there is a lot more we could talk about, but I would rather, instead of spending another hour now, I'd rather have you on again sometime in the near future, if that would be all right. And I would think there's, with everything you have going on with MissionAero Pipeline and the different ministries you get to be a part of, I'm sure there would be updates as well that you could have and different things. And maybe even if we could do it during a time frame, maybe we could possibly meet some of the young men and women that you get to influence there. But first of all, I want to say thank you so much for being with us for just a few minutes. Have some folks watching on YouTube and Facebook and Periscope, Twitter and Twitch and all of that. And to those of you that are watching, if you can tell us, how could people get a better sense of, you've given a very good idea, but how could people read up a little bit more on what you guys are doing? What's the website? What's an email address? Maybe I saw the email that you sent me with the update. How could they subscribe to that and really keep abreast of what's going on? Because I'm excited about it. How could other people keep abreast of that?
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and would welcome the opportunity for you to meet our missionaries. They're great young people. They love the Lord, and it's a pleasure working with them. And we have so much support here at First Baptist Church of Hammond, serving here. Pastor Wilkerson, 100% on board. Our team, obviously, 100% on board. And it's a privilege. So we welcome the opportunity to share what we get to do because we're passionate and we're burdened. And so we have a couple of websites, cityoutreachfoundation.com, that talks about the big picture of what we all do, kind of the short elevator speech for all of it. And then we each have our own individual sites. So MissionAero.org, MissionAero, and the name kind of comes from it. It'll help you remember it. The Spanish word, I have a burden for Latin America. The Spanish word for missionary is misionero. And so that's kind of where that comes from. But then also mission, that's our goal, that's our desire. And then aero, AERO, aerospace. So our goal is aerospace, but kind of a pun for missionero, misionero. So we're at missionaero.org. And if you click subscribe on the bottom, you'll enter your email address and you'll get our updates automatically. Just sent one out, and we would love to have some more interest because it's an amazing opportunity for us, and we'd love for you to know what's going on.
Very cool. So I think I'm going to do a Cliff Notes version here at the very end, just for people that maybe they just want to tune in. Things I learned. You're a spy. You've been to 7 continents. You get to do a lot of cool stuff serving God. Fear being out of God's will more than anything else. Let's see, what else did we learn? You're surrounded by cool people, piano players, and I know a friend of Brother Abdel Judah. He's a cool guy as well, and so he's awesome. Let's see, what else did we learn? There's a lot. If you're just caught the very end, wait till it ends, go back and replay the whole thing, and you won't miss out.
The shoulders, spiritual giants. We talked about that.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, if you won't stand on the giant shoulders, whether they be aviation, whether they be spiritual, absolutely, that's huge. I'm pumped. I mean, it's what is it, 10 o'clock at night here Eastern time, and just ready to go out and conquer the world. It's awesome. So I think we do need to have you on at some point in the near future. Again, have some other folks we're going to have on as well. And I greatly appreciate your time being with us and explaining what you do. And we'll end this here in just a moment here. I think we're approaching, let me see what kind of time frame we have. We have 56 minutes, and so we're getting close to that hour mark. So I greatly appreciate you carving out that much time. For those of you that are watching, if you watch on YouTube, if you would subscribe, because we will be bringing some more folks, and of course, Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green back on at some point in the future. But we have some other folks that have already committed to be on, probably about 7 or 8 other folks that we have in the pipeline as early as probably not tomorrow, but as early as Monday, Tuesday of next week. And so that'll be fantastic. And just stay updated with what we're doing. And please go to cityoutreachfoundation.com. Was that right?
That's right.
So that you can subscribe to MissionAero.com, AERO.com, to stay up to date on what God's doing with Miss Jennifer-Ruth Green and everything that's going on there. It's, we talk about the ills of our nation, but if we're not actively working to invest in the youth of our nation, then it's all complaining and it's all just noise. And so you're doing something right now to combat it and work long into the future for the Amazon and around the world. And I'm sure, I know I have some friends in Papua New Guinea there that I'm sure they use missionary aviation, and I'm sure some of your folks, some of your kids could end up there in the next 5-10 years. And so I'm excited about the possibility. So any last words, anything you want to say, or just get off your chest, anything you want to say to the folks that are listening, maybe just hi mom or something.
Sure. I just want to say that the ministry is great. It is a privilege and honor, and I get the opportunity to use all of the skills that God has prepared for me over the last 29 plus years. And so it's been a blessing. The ministry is great. That's all I can say. Hi, Mom. Love you.
Amen. Thank you so much. Stick around for just a second on the video chat. We'll talk for just a moment here. But just want to thank everyone that's watching, listen. If you would like, comment, share, follow, to subscribe, all that stuff, that would be a help so your friends can see these awesome folks I get to talk to as well. Let's see. We'll go ahead and